So we got a busy one today.
Just everybody.
Okay. Consent or regular? Okay, so I'll just stay here. Should I vote? Okay, no voting order. Okay, so I'll just, okay.
Oh, it's on the consent agenda?
Not yours, mine. Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Welcome, everybody, to the December the 10th, 2019 City of Columbia Board of Zoning Appeals. My name is Chuck Sally, and I've served as chair of the board. And I'd like at this time to introduce the other board members. To my far left is John Gregory, and immediately to my left is Gene Dinkins, and then to my right is Marcellus Primus. Next to Marcellus is Jenna Stevens, and then Josh Speed on the far right. I'd also like to introduce everybody to the staff sitting at the table in front of us. Rachel Bailey is the zoning administrator, Hope Hasty, deputy zoning administrator, Andrea Wolf also with us today, as well as Erica Hine. This board is charged with hearing applications for special exceptions, variances, and administrative appeals. All testimony is recorded, and anyone wishing to speak will need to be sworn in, and they must come to the podium before you can speak. No testimony may be taken from the floor. When you come to the podium, state your name and please speak clearly into the microphone because the meeting is being recorded. Applicants with cases before the board are allotted a presentation time of 10 minutes. This time also includes all persons presenting information on behalf of the applicant. This time limit does not include any questions asked by the board or staff. Any member of the public may address the board in intervals of 3 minutes or 5 minutes if a spokesperson for 3 or more people. The applicant has 5 minutes for rebuttal. After that, and the board reserves the right to amend these limits on a case-by-case basis. Those of you who plan to speak must be sworn, so if you're here as an applicant or here to speak in any case, please stand at this time and raise your right hand. Do you affirm or attest that the testimony you will give today is the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you. At this time, I'll turn the meeting over to Ms. Bailey.
Good morning. So a couple announcements before we get started. Item number 7 on the regular agenda, which is case 2019-0069 for Broad River Road and Lake Murray Boulevard, has deferred, so it will not be heard today. It is scheduled to go in January at this point. And Mr. Dinkins has recused himself from an item on the consent agenda, so he will be refraining from voting on the consent agenda. The board uses the consent agenda to approve non-controversial or routine matters by a single motion and vote. If a member of the board or the general public wants to discuss an item on the consent agenda, that item is removed and considered during the meeting. The board then approves the remaining consent agenda items. This month, the consent agenda has the approval of the November 12th, 2019 minutes. Item number 2, which is case 2019-0072 for 1332 Rosewood Drive, a variance to the maximum fence height requirement in a front yard setback. Item number 3, case 2019-0073 for 2807 Atlas Road, a variance to the maximum sign display surface area. Item number 4, case 2019-0074 for 2510 North Main Street. It's a special exception to establish a print shop. Item number 5, case 2019-0079 for 901 Spears Creek Court. This is a special exception to establish a restaurant with a drive-through. And item number 6, case 2019-0080 for 508 Gadsden Street, a special exception to expand a sorority house. That completes the consent agenda.
Okay, does anyone in the audience or on the board wish any of these cases to be removed from the consent agenda before we vote? I see no one. I'd like to make a motion then that we approve the consent agenda as stated and subject to all comments of staff in the application. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, and anyone with a case on the consent agenda is welcome to leave unless they would like to stay through the meeting. The first case on the regular agenda is item number 8, case 2019-0075 for 1324 Richland Street. This is a special exception to establish an outdoor public-private event space. And I just want to give a little background before the applicant comes forward. Sometimes when dealing with our table of permitted uses and the standard industrial classification system, a use doesn't fit in the box perfectly. This one did not meet the definition of a public park through our ordinance. And since they're having some private events as well, that's where the classification of the event space came from. So the applicant is welcome to come forward.
Good morning. My name is Bruce Yeske. I am the personal representative for Joseph Azar. And Joseph, in his will, wanted to donate property to a church, a local church here in Columbia, and have a public-private park created in that space. Right now there's a parking lot there, and he wanted to have something that the community could use, and the church could use and administer, and generate something that was more useful than a parking lot in the city. This is over on Richland Street, and I don't know if you folks have any questions, but Joseph's cousin, William Akel, is sitting back here. He helped with the design of this project and has done a lot of work on that.
Yes, sir. So are you familiar with the criteria that you filled out on your application?
Yes, sir.
That's kind of what we need to go by.
Yes,
so
sir.
If you want to kind of lead us through that, that'd be great.
Okay. Item number 1, they were talking about the proposed special exemption not having adverse effect on vehicular traffic, and we anticipate about 50%, or at least 50%, will be absorbed by the local church there.
How much parking are you anticipating needing?
I think it depends on how many people are going to be attending any of these events, but I don't think it's going to be more than 30 or 40 cars there at any given time.
And as no structure is currently planned for the site other than the small amphitheater, there's no parking requirement triggered.
Got it. Okay.
Okay. A nearby local church is going to control access to the property, to the fenced property, and it's going to be locked when it's not in use. So we also expect this park will be used sporadically, and the schedule is going to be controlled by the church.
Is there some type of reciprocal agreement with the church so that they get to use the parking when they need it when they're having services, or is it just...
Well, the way I understand it, the church is going to be controlling the events, and they would schedule those and make sure that that's not happening during
Okay.
a
So the
high,
church would be actually controlling the events that would be on the property.
Yes, sir.
Got it.
Okay. Item 3 has to deal with the aesthetics of the area, and I believe that it's going to improve the aesthetics of the neighborhood, because right now we just have an empty parking lot, and this is going to be a nice looking park here with a little stage and a cover over that. And to me, it's an improvement for the neighborhood. Item 4, the church is going to be controlling access. Once again, we've got the fenced property that's going to be locked. The church is going to schedule things, and we're designing the park with low liability in mind. We've already got some trimming done on the trees, trying to make sure that everything is safe there. And to me, the view there says a lot. It's really a good-looking thing here.
I got a question. How nearby is the church? When I was reading this prior, I didn't see which church that will be responsible for maintaining this.
Yes, we have worked with 2 churches, most recently the Greek Orthodox Church over on Sumter Street. We met with those folks late last week.
How close is that church to the site?
I guess that's about 3 or 4 blocks away.
In your application, it says the church will control access. So are you referring to the Greek Orthodox? Y'all have an agreement in place with them to already control it?
Yes, sir.
Or,
Do you have an agreement in writing, or is this verbal?
Right now, it's all verbal. We can do something in writing if that's necessary. I don't think that would be a problem. In meeting with the church leaders the other day, they seemed very anxious to get this going, and we're excited about it. Okay, item 5 here, moving along. I guess you're asking about other things like this in the area. There really is nothing like this in the area that I have seen. So this is the first thing that would be there. Item number 6, talking about how the exemption is consistent with the character of the area, and we're just saying that the park embraces an open and natural design, as you can see here, and it's consistent with the existing use of the land. The next part talks a little bit about the location and compatibility with permitted uses, and this park is designed for use by the community and residents of Columbia, and is going to be maintained and administered by the church, as we said. And we needed this exemption because the park is designed to add value to the community and the neighborhood, and providing a space that's controlled and can be utilized by the citizens. And as was stated earlier, I don't think that this fits quite into any of the categories that were set up, so we just dealt with this as a special exemption. Any other questions?
So is the church actually doing the improvements on the site? Is that the plan, or who's doing that? Who's improving the site? I mean, it looks like some substantial improvements
Yes.
to the existing site.
That is going to be performed by Joseph's cousin, William Akel, has designed all this,
Uh-huh.
and is working with some contractors in the area, trying to get some bids on it, and getting it to this basic design.
Gotcha.
How many people do you think the maximum number of guests, let's call it, would be at any given time?
William, you have a feel for that?
Please come to the podium.
Hi, William Akel. If it was maxed out, I mean, people just side by side everything, 200, but it's not going to be used like that.
Are there any residents nearby? I looked on the tax records for the immediate parcels to the right and the left, but behind them, across from this, are there any homes?
Behind it, there's an apartment complex because the gentleman who was managing the actual parking lot actually owns the building, so he was okay with it. He actually thought it might improve the area a little bit.
Okay.
The commercial buildings on either side of it, though.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here to speak in favor or against this application?
Good morning. My name is David Turner. I'm the Director of Music at Ebenezer Lutheran Church and Director of Community and Parish Engagement, and we're located directly across the street from this property. We had a very generous offer from the family for us to be able to utilize this space in the way that they have proposed to design it, and we considered it greatly. We have a large outdoor space that we use on a regular basis for concerts, food and beverage offerings, and so we're very familiar with hosting events on that exact blot in a familiar fashion. One of the things that we struggle with on a regular basis is public safety and managing some of the transitional folks that live in and around that area, either in the tower or at transitions. We have found that horizontal surfaces are not our friend because they become campsites. And so we've actually had to take the time to redo all of our gate system, locking system, remove places that would be inviting for someone to spend the night. It's unfortunate for these folks, but many of them suffer from mental illness and therefore use our property as their personal restroom. So we're concerned about this coming up across the street because, as wonderful as it looks there, our church leadership sort of sees this as another place that's inviting for folks to come and camp out overnight, and it doesn't make our efforts, the City of Columbia's Police Department or the Yellow Shirts efforts, very easy to maintain safety in the neighborhood when we have a spot that's inviting. So I just wanted to share that if there's any questions.
Is this part of the Yellow Shirt?
It is within the bid, yeah.
And it's currently not locked, right?
Currently, it's a gravel parking lot, and as unattractive as a gravel parking lot is, it serves its purpose for cars to park there, and then it's well lit, and it doesn't attract individuals in the evening.
Great. Anything else?
That's it.
Thank you for your testimony.
And I just want to direct the board's attention, you all actually have two different emails from the City Center Partnership related to this property, the most recent being from yesterday from Matt Kinnell.
Is anyone else in the audience would care to speak about this? Any discussion from the board? Sure.
The design of the park there with the open fence makes it as easy as possible for the police to do a drive-by and check to see if there are vagrants camping out there or whatever. But I understand the concerns of the church, and that was one of our concerns in trying to design something that was open and usable and making sure that it was as safe as possible. That's all I wanted to add.
You know, a 5,000 square foot lot is small. That's just above the threshold for the city's minimum lot size in the city. So I'm thinking, potential for 200 potential guests here on such a small property without any parking seems like a lot to me in a residential area. I think they've got a good idea, but I'm not sure that this parcel is large enough and being located in a residential area like this, if this is appropriate for this area. I think you'd have a hard time arguing that it doesn't potentially have a substantial adverse impact on the adjoining properties. Item number 2, in terms of environmental factors such as noise, lights, glare, etc. I don't know how it couldn't.
And just to clarify, it's an office and institutional district. There are some residences around there, but there's also offices mixed in as well, so it's not a residential zoning district.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with that. Gene, also just potentially becoming a nuisance without any agreement in place currently, if this were to pass and get constructed with no agreement actually in place with the church or any other body, who's going to maintain this, who's going to keep up with it. So that's my concern.
Come on. Yeah, come on.
I did start talking to the churches. I did talk to Ebenezer first because they were the first on the list. Then I talked to the Holy Trinity, the Greek Cathedral. They're drafting up the agreement. We had to get a meeting of the minds first on anything to get an idea. But without to be honest with you, entering into a legal agreement without having the zoning passed is a waste of time because it's moot. If the city says no, then the agreement's void anyway. So we were going to wait to see what you said before we actually entered into anything written. But our discussions we had with them on Friday, because we had scheduled to meet with them in person, I did all this remote from Las Vegas, was we agreed upon certain things and how it was going to work. Their lawyers were going to put it in writing and then get it back to us in the typical back and forth. But we have started that, but to enter it into it prior to wouldn't make a lot of sense. Now, if you want to predicate it on an agreement, I don't have any issues with that. I think, that agreement will be coming forth for sure, and the city might want to take a look at it to make sure it fits what you want or add a paragraph or something like that. And there, we have no issues with that. So,
Would you stay there for a sec?
yeah, sure.
So all right, so the ownership is not changing.
Well, let me clarify that. Currently, the land is owned by my cousin's estate, and that's Bruce
Right.
Yeske, who's the executor. So what'll happen is I'll pay for the building part of it myself, and then when it's all done, both the land and the building together will be given to the church. So they will then become the custodian, the owner, the overseer of it. They'll own it. So his estate will get an in-kind contribution for the land. I'll personally get an in-kind contribution for the building, and that's how it's going to work from an accounting standpoint.
Is anybody here from the church?
I don't know. Is there? No.
Seems kind of odd that you're going to give them this piece of property and they're not even here to support you in getting the variance for it.
Well, they didn't think it was going to be, to be honest with you, they didn't think it was a big deal on the variance, because like she said, it was more a matter of, in Richland County, if the property was in Richland County, they already have a designation that a C1 you could do this.
Well, what is the, so my question then is that it was brought up, which is a legitimate concern. Actually, there are two that were brought up, but one of those concerns is the, how one handles the parking for an event here.
Well, we had two aspects for that. We were told from the city that half of the parking had to be on the street, and the other half had to be some other fashion. So we said, well, obviously we can't build a parking lot because it's not there, and we're not going to put it above it. So I said, what if we use the parking lot of the church that's going to be the custodian? Mm-hmm. So they said that would work, and initially we had put in a variance for the parking. There's a variance we had to put in for that, and then when they found out the church was going to give their parking for that, they said, you don't have to worry about that, just go with the variance for the zoning.
Right, so,
Let me clarify on that. Had a parking requirement been triggered, so had there been a structure with gross floor area to trigger a parking requirement, it is in the City Center Design Development District overlay, which allows for up to 50% of an off-street parking requirement to be met within 400 feet of the site with public parking. Because there is not a structure right now planned that's going to have any gross floor area, it's not going to trigger a zoning parking requirement. So I had let them know that a variance was not necessary at this point unless the plans change in the future for an actual building.
right, so if it really is dependent too on when the events are held. If it's in the middle of a work week, that's not a good time. If it's on a Sunday, that's not a good time. Or at least maybe a Sunday afternoon or something like that, but not when there's all the churches in here, trying to looking for parking places for services on Sunday. That wouldn't be a good time. It seems like to me that it's a noble idea if we could figure out a way to make sure that it was a little bit better thought out with someone coming in to take. I don't see anybody taking ownership of it, the ongoing part of it. And that is the church that's going to receive this property, I think, needs to come in and take ownership of the property and be able to assure, the public that they are going to, commit the resources necessary so that it doesn't become a nuisance to the surrounding neighbors, and that it doesn't become a parking issue for the surrounding neighbors. That's my thought. So what my suggestion would be is that you guys rethink this and go back to the church and come back here with a better, more stout plan about how it's going to happen before we can issue that. Because once we issue it, then you can do, I'd have to put a list of stipulations, 2 pages long, which I'm not prepared to really do right now. And I'd rather see a plan I'd rather see you put the work up front with the church that says, we're going to take ownership of it, here's our plan, and here's how we're going to alleviate the issues that are there. I mean, that's my personal feeling.
I have one more question. How many parking spots are available in the church?
In the church, hundreds. They have
Hundreds.
hundreds of parking spots, yeah. They actually rent out some of their parking spots, from what I understand.
Well, that's the other thing. See, it depends on when, because they have leases committed to that parking during the weekday, so it may not always be available, and that's something that would, you'd want to know.
Well, all I can tell you is the idea behind the park, it's going to be used for, people will use it for birthday parties, they'll use it for Christmas events, Easter events, they'll use it for afternoon Sunday gatherings. People might want to go out there and do plays, readings, things like that. So that's the idea behind the park as far as...
Love the idea. Think it's a great idea. I just am concerned that the cart has gotten in front of the horse.
All right, well, one thing that will be helpful on our end, and I can understand your point of view on a couple things, is we would need some guidance on some of those restrictions, because we in that agreement wouldn't want to that's the other thing, is we can't put any restrictions on the church. Once we turn it over to them, they technically can do what they want to do with it. So if the city wants to say, okay, you can't use it between this hour and that kind of stuff, I mean, I can't control that in the agreement, because it's out of our hands at that point. So we would kind of need some guidance from you guys with the church, so that you could say to them, this is what we're thinking, and let them see if they agree with it or not, because that's out of my hands, really.
Well, I'm not going to meet with the church and
No,
talk
I know
about
that,
what
but
they
I'm
do.
saying-
So my suggestion to you is that you meet with the church and all of the neighbors around the property and come to a consensus on what really works for this, so that it doesn't become a nuisance and it doesn't create a traffic or parking issue in the neighborhood, and then come back to us. And I bet you it'll be a smooth sailing if you got all those things figured out.
Okay, so it's mainly a coordination of events, so that if it was another event
Yep.
going on at the same time, like a big, I don't know, like they had a Christmas parade I think this weekend, if something like that was going on, you wouldn't want to hold an event the same day as that's happening, something like that.
All right, just you said the words just came out of your mouth. Once y'all give it to the church, it's theirs. Well, we haven't heard from them.
Okay.
And, you have a choice right now. If the applicant would come back up to the podium, I'd like to, we can vote on this right now, and you can kind of, roll the dice on whether it passes or not, or we can, I'd be willing to make a motion. I think my comrades would agree that we could, make a motion to defer if you want some more time to get some more information and talk with the church and the neighbors about it. What do you think?
I think that we would do better to defer, yes, sir.
In that case, I make a motion then that we defer this matter for reasonable time in the future, and that's it. That's my motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
1, 2. All right, so let's just raise our hands. We good with that? All in favor say aye, and opposed? Okay, the motion carries. First.
Okay.
All right. And Mr. Sally is recused from item number 9, our next case on the agenda, which is case 2019-0076 for 6800, 6790, and 6780 Garner's Ferry Road, special exception to establish a liquor store. The applicant, if present, is welcome to come to the podium.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman and members of the board, I'm Bob Fuller. I'm an attorney in Columbia, and I'm here today representing the applicant for this special exception. Let me say at the outset, it is a request that is being promulgated by the Greens liquor stores who operate other locations in Columbia. The licensee name on the application is a licensee of Greens. So it is the familiar operation that operates in, down, and out on I-26 and in other locations in the southeast. We are here today, and I think you are familiar with the location. It's the Landmark Square Shopping Center, which is on Garner's Ferry Road, 17-acre shopping center that's been there for many years. Operates directly across Garner's Ferry Road from the VA hospital facility. The site has access from Leesburg Road. It has access to on Garner's Ferry and one on True Street. So there's an easy accommodation in and out of the large shopping center area. The proposal is for 3 of the shopping center bays in the existing structures that are on the site. So it's important, I think, to recognize that this is not going to be a new facility standalone that will require development of a site and the accommodation of traffic coming in, going in a different direction or different ways and means than already operates in this established retail center. There will be no reconfiguration of the building, which will be occupied by this occupation and use that requires a special exception. There is going to be a refurbishment of the exterior of the shopping center by the owner of the center. That will simply be an aesthetic upgrade to the facilities, but won't reorient any of the established places or the access, ingress, egress from them. Say at the outset, this is an operation similar to the Greens operation, which is a standard South Carolina operational ABC store adjacent to a beer and wine store, like a party store or a facility that you see here in Columbia in several locations. They are regulated completely by the ABC Commission. There are no flexible office hours. There are no openings and there are no signage opportunities beyond those allowed by the ABC Commission, the law and the regulations and the ordinances of the City of Columbia. This operation for this center is in compliance with every one of those limiting details of operation. It is the requisite distant and far more distant from anything that is a concerned use for the ABC regulations. Churches, the closest church is over 780 feet away from the location. The requirement in the city is 300 feet. So there is nothing even marginally close about that location. To address the criteria for this establishment, it's simply to say it is for the purpose of operating a high-volume retail merchandise business, not unlike the pet food business that formerly occupied the space. The object is to sell retail products out of the facility. This one, the product happens to be alcohol, spirits, beer, and wine. So the first criteria that is addressed, of course, deals with the impact on vehicular safety and pedestrian safety. it could not be in a safer location for pedestrian and vehicular services. It is well off of Garners Ferry Road in the backside of the shopping center. It is in a location that is fully staffed for parking purposes for the 17-acre center. There's no ability to have a problem with the parking on the grounds that large. As I've already said in the item 2, there's not going to be any modification or difference made in the external features of the buildings and the improvements on site. So there'll be no impact whatsoever on the environmental factors of noise, lights, etc., because there will be no change in what has been there for the existing life of the center. There's been no operational change that will make a difference in any of those factors that are off the immediate vicinity of the operating property. There's not going to be any different orientation of the use of the property than there was before. There will be parking in front on perfect near the entrances of the building, pedestrian foot traffic into the building, the purchase of retail supplies coming back to the parking lot. There's no reconfiguration of the activity or the pattern of movement through the facility. It's simply a set of customers coming for a product that is no longer pet supplies. It is beer and wine or alcoholic beverages under the regulatory practices that govern those things. The aesthetic character will not be affected whatsoever except by the intended refurbishment of the entire facade of the center by the owner to upgrade the appearances of it. There is a limitation on the signage that can be produced for a liquor store and for a beer and wine store in South Carolina. They are regulated and you cannot exceed them. The liquor store is going to be limited to the red dot shields that are required and can't be exceeded by every ABC store. And there are significant modifications and restrictions on the signage of the beer and wine sale that will make their images on the facade of the building smaller than other retailers that are already there. Under item 4, there's not going to be any adverse impact on public safety. There's no nuisance consideration here because this is a legitimate retail business in a regulated industry in an established area operated by a well-known, highly regarded, and established retailer of wine and spirits. They operate in different locations. The sale of these products is the same as is done from Whole Foods and from Bi-Lo and from Kroger and everywhere else. They've all got gigantic wine and beer departments, and the product that is coming through the store is no different than that in the beer and wine sales section of this operation. There is no on-premises use. This is not a come get your product and stay there with it. You come pick it up and you carry it away just as you would have if you went there to buy pet food supplies. The nature of the business is simply high volume retail, and it is a business that has had no problems operating in Columbia under this license for greens at any of the locations. It is not, under item 5, there's no prospect of there being a proliferation of this type of use. There are really no closely proximate beer and wine and liquor distributors. The closest facility that would be similar is Bottles, which is 1.3, almost a mile and a half away on Garners Ferry towards the inner part of the city. This is accessible by, as I said, by 3 major roads that handle huge traffic volumes in the city. This will not be a store generating more traffic. It will simply be capturing traffic which is already traveling the Garners Ferry area in this commercially viable part of the city's growth. The intersections on primary intersection on Garners Ferry Road is signalized. There are 2 entrances on Garners Ferry. One of them is signalized. So that is a traffic reliever that is already present and will not be affected adversely by this new location. There are no qualifying or limiting zoning overlay districts or anything that would restrict the property against the use of this nature. I have also said, and it is true, that ABC licensing requirements are a limitation on what can be done there, and they are all in compliance with this use and this operational pattern that is to be established on this property. So it's not as if some retailer of either liquor or wine and beer can come in and decide he's doesn't like the way ABC operates things and they're going to stay open all night or going to stay open until midnight or going to open at 6 a.m. in the morning. They can't do it. They're regulated. The office hours, the hours of operation, I am advised by this store will probably terminate for beer and wine at 8 to 9 o'clock in the evening, perhaps Friday or Saturday, an hour difference, but they do not stay open into the night. The liquor store is controlled by state law and will have a prescribed closing time, just like every other facility that's regulated. This is not an area that is heavily endowed with any particular use. It is widely diverse. There are not a great many liquor stores in the area. There are some, but they're not in close proximity, and it is really a diverse area, and it is a burgeoning area. This is a service industry and a product retailer that is coming in and will have no adverse effect on the surrounding community, but will provide service to both the transient traffic that's already there and for the neighborhood use for people who go to the big grocery stores and the other suppliers of goods and services in the area. I am aware that there was one objection that was raised, proximity to churches, but there is no prohibiting location consequence here. There's not a closely related church that makes it in any way out of compliance with the state law, the local ordinances, or the city requirements. And we would submit to you that it is the opportunity to allow a new business to come into a space that has been operating the same way and simply gone from that use.
Well, thank you for your thorough testimony. I think that was very helpful. Do any other members of the board have any questions for the applicant? Okay, I think you did a good job of addressing all the specific criteria that we're going to be looking at as we decide whether or not to grant the special exception. Are any members of the audience here to speak either in favor or against this application? Please approach.
Not to take a
Please state your name for the record.
Yes, sir. My name is Matthew Markham.
Okay, thank you.
I live in the area, and I'm not here to take a staunch position on for or against. I just wanted to, and I think the applicant may have answered the questions, clarify the intention of how the business is to be run. There's a fine line between what I think can be a non-policed center for littering and additional, I guess, maybe an absentee owner operation is what I'm concerned about. There are a couple of, I guess, the 40 cigarettes and lotto tickets mini-mart style, which I think encourages additional crime in the area sometimes. I do not think, based on the description, this would be one of those at all. Just did want to, I guess, make sure that there was additional clarification on maybe how it's intended to be operated in such a manner that's going to be policed with the customers, as far as if any, on-site usage was going to be had. Obviously, you can say that there's none allowed, but if the owner does not intend to police that fact and make sure that does not continue to happen, then it encourages, in an area that I think already tends to be prone to that, some additional negative attention from potentially the customer base. So just not taking a position specifically for or against, but just to make sure that the operation was going to be,
And I think the applicant addressed that in his testimony. He stated that there would not be any on-premises consumption.
Right,
So
absolutely. Yep.
I think he answered
Thank
that
you very
question for you. Okay, any other members of the audience wish to speak on this matter? Okay, I'd like to open it up for board discussion.
I think you did a great job with all the criteria. My only question, I guess, is about number 5. You say there are no liquor stores within the immediate area, and is Nan Asbury here? We got this email saying there were 12 liquor stores in the neighborhood, and I'm curious where those 12 are. I can only think of one on Garner's Ferry nearby.
Please come back to yes, please come back to the podium. Excuse,
This is-
please state.
Wayne Levance, I guess their neighborhood is subjective. There's bottles, and there is a little mom and pop liquor store in I think it's a Walgreens, it's behind there, but other than that, there's nothing within 2 to 3 miles, or 3 to 4 miles of anything that we know of. I mean, the neighborhood, they could honestly go all the way down to Assembly and say that our store's in the neighborhood if you really wanted to get out, but, and I want to address him while I'm here, the operations. If anybody knows Greens, we run a well-lit, well-run. I've been doing this for 35 years in business. I've been here with Locke in the Greens for 15 years. Our stores are clean. We hire police officers on the weekend when it's busy to make sure things don't happen. We use Lexington County Sheriffs at our Piney Grove store, and we use City of Columbia off-duty police officers in our stores downtown, and I think we'll probably use them out there. I think that's who we'd have to use there. So to address the concerns, we run the store no different than Target, Walmart. Actually, run them better. But as we try to make them safe, we make them well lit, well run, clean stores.
Please expand just a little bit. What do you mean you hire police officers on the weekend?
We use off-duty police officers through the city. It's through the city, and Lexington County. They police the store. They presence just security.
So
they're security. They're our off-duty security.
Are they there at the door, or are they just on call?
And they do both. They'll run the parking lot when it's busy, or they'll stay at the door, or they'll run people off. Vagrants, people who are littering, people who are loitering. They'll run them off. That's what we have them there for.
Is that required?
No, sir.
Okay, so that seems to be a good step.
Yes, sir.
Then is providing on-site security.
And we will have them into the new store as well when they're required.
Any other questions or conversation?
No further questions, just discussion. I mean, I think it's good. Greens is well established in the community. They do have on-site security, and I think they meet all the criteria for a special exception. I can't think of one that they have not met.
I think I would certainly agree with you. Any other board comments? Okay, at this time, I'd like to ask for a motion.
Make a motion to approve the special exception as applied.
Subject to all the staff comments.
So, yeah, subject to all staff comments.
We have a motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Thank you.
All right, the next matter is item number 10, case 2019-0077. This is 5108 Kilbourne Road. This is a variance to the front yard setback requirement to allow a covered porch. I believe the applicant is present, and she is welcome to come forward.
I'm Julia Bradham, and this is my sister Harriet. She also owns the property at 5108 Kilburn. When I bought this property a long time ago, it only had 3 steps that went up to the front door. So years later, well, probably about 7 years ago, we decided to put a front porch with a roof on because it really needed it. So the contractor that we had told us that she had applied for a permit and all that, so we thought everything was good. We had no idea that we had to apply for a variance until we hired another contractor recently who came up to get the permit and whatever goes on. And he came back and said, no, this is what you need to do. So I'm sorry about that. We had no idea. So what we're applying for is to rebuild the porch roof that was never done properly. It's starting to fall apart a little bit on the inside. So we just want to raise it up. That's the only, repair it and raise it up. Really rebuild it is what we want to do. So.
Yes, ma'am. Are you familiar with the criteria that for the variance that we have to consider when you filled out your application?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear all of that.
Were you familiar with the criteria that you filled out that the board has to consider when granting a variance?
I think so.
Okay. Do you want to kind of run through that for us real quickly?
These questions? Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to read the question and the answer?
Yeah, so the first one, the house being, exceptional conditions, it was built on the setback.
Right. And it just had the 3 steps. The second one, explain how the conditions do not generally apply to the other property in the vicinity. Most of the homes in this Hayward Park area were built with covered porches. I think that ours is, there may be one other one, but they all have covered porches. They're old houses. And then it says, describe the ways that the zoning ordinance effectively prohibit. Anyway, the step, like I was just saying, the steps were built in the setback and needed to be covered. And describe the ways in which granting of the variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent parcels or to the public good. The porch will definitely add to the character of the neighborhood, as the existing roof over the porch was constructed incorrectly and looks terrible. Explain how the variance request is the minimum necessary to make possible the reasonable use of the land, building, and structure. As I said before, we're not going to enlarge anything. We're going up, not out. So, and then it will look more like it goes with the neighborhood, I think. I think they would tell you that, too.
Did you include a plan on what you were planning on doing to the porch exactly in here?
No. We didn't. I could tell you exactly what we're going to do, but I didn't get a plan.
Can we leave that one on for a second? Yeah, would you describe
Okay.
this picture?
Okay, see the dormer above the porch? We would like to have the dormer removed and the roof raised so that it comes off of the roof to the house, and it has so that it'll go with the other dormers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, we would have to get taller columns. But,
And that's all we want to do, is just extend
see,
the roof.
the roof is 4 inches above the front door. I mean, it really goes on.
4 inches.
Yeah.
We were talking about this much.
It was
room.
poorly built. It was
poorly built.
So the existing porch is in the setback, is that correct,
Yes.
Rachel?
The covered roof is, so the stairs without a cover are able to project into the setback, so they were built that way, but once they become covered, the setback applies. So the house is behind the setback, but the stairs project into it, as does the roof.
What about so the landing then also is in the setback?
Correct.
Gotcha.
All in all, it comes out about 6 feet. So their house is at about 26.5 feet, and then with the stairs, it comes to about 20 to 20.5. So their request is for a 20-foot setback, just to alleviate, to make up for the roof overhang.
And so for clarity, you're not trying to go further out
Oh, no,
with that?
no.
How about width-wise? Are you going wider?
No.
No, so it's the same thing, you're just bringing the roof up and...
Well, the roof will be, whatever this is called.
Yeah.
It'll be like
But
this.
the
It won't
porch
be.
itself is what it is. It's not going to be projected out anymore. It's just, all we want to do is build up.
Which is what we
not
should have done
out,
to begin
Which is
with.
what we should have done to begin with, but we didn't know.
You're trying to build the covered porch flush with the rest of the roof.
I'm sorry.
Build the porch flush, bring it up to flush with the rest of the roof. Yeah.
Same eve. Understood. Okay, sorry for the interruption. So, I mean, I think I think definitely that it's the minimum necessary. You're not trying to really expand it at all outward into the encroachment. And I agree that it will be an upgrade to the neighborhood and the character of the areas. Thank you very much for your testimony. Is anyone else here to speak on this matter?
No, we submitted some emails from some of the people in the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
but no one's here.
Those are part of the
Dang, how
package.
did you know that?
For the record, those were in support of your application, correct?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tried to get everyone, the neighbors on either side are not well, so we didn't bother them. And there's a girl across the street that's trying to get her PhD, so we didn't bother her either. But we got everybody.
We got the rest of them.
Well, your home was posted with the yellow sign, I'm sure.
I'm sorry.
The yellow sign was posted in your
Oh,
yard, I'm sure.
yes.
So that gave plenty of neighbors
Oh, yes.
the chance and
They
put them on
all
notice
asked.
that something was happening, so.
But yeah, we've lived there 24 years, so we know
Great.
all the people.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Chuck, I'd like to make a motion to approve it, subject to staff comments and subject to not bringing it out further than where it already is.
Okay, I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the next item on the agenda, item number 11, case 2019-0078 for 1401, 1405, 1411, and 1413 Assembly Street, as well as 1011, 1015, 1017, and 1019 Washington Street. This is a special exception to exceed the maximum density per acre for a student dormitory. The applicants are present and are welcome to come forward.
Morning. I'm Mark Lecoq with CRG. This is Andrew Savoy, Senior Project Manager with CRG, and this is Bob Neely with the Mar Johnson Collaborative, the architect for the project. I'm going to give really quick 1-minute introduction on who we are, and then Andrew is going to walk you through the exception and the questions that we've submitted in the presentation. CRG is a Chicago-based real estate development firm. We're a vertically integrated firm, which is just a fancy way of saying we do development, construction, and architecture in-house. So we're all colleagues here working together on this project. We focus on urban development in areas that have lifestyle, education, employment amenities. We've got current projects in Chicago, St. Louis, Miami, Fort Worth, San Diego, and then of course here in Columbia. We do have a long history of doing student housing projects or student-focused projects in areas like Columbia that have a large university. And that's part of what has drawn us to this site and to this project. Generally speaking, the exception that we're asking for, we believe is reasonable and completely appropriate for this site, and it's consistent with surrounding uses. The project that we intend to build is going to be a intentionally and thoughtfully designed, student-focused residence, not unlike others that are in the area serving primarily the student body at the University of South Carolina. So with that, I'll turn it over to Andrew, who will walk you through the presentation. Thank you.
Hi there. So just some background on the project. We've controlled the site for several years, and we had previously gotten a 305-unit residential development approved on the site. It was 2 floors of parking with 14 floors of residential units above.
Could you move the mic a little bit closer to you, please?
I'm sorry.
You can pull it down.
Sure. So at this point, we'd like to, we've reprogrammed the project to now be 11 stories of residential above 5 floors of parking. And we maintained the density by including 4 and 5 bedroom units, which were not in the original plan. This puts us into private student dormitory territory, and it makes us subject to the 150 bed per acre cap, which we were not previously subject to. So I'm here to ask for a special exception to give us relief from that cap. And we think that given the other student projects in the area, the Hub, the Empire, that this is consistent with what has been approved before. And at this point, I'd like to go through our application and answer each one of the points. So the first point was, will this have an adverse impact on the traffic? And could we pull up the ground floor plan? So this is the lower level plan. This is where the main entrance and exits will be to the site from a vehicular perspective. We have shown this to the city's traffic engineer, David Brewer, and he feels that since student projects where the residents tend to walk to school every day generate less trips than residential projects where somebody might drive to work every day, that he was comfortable with the traffic impact study we had done previously, and that is included in our application materials. And then if we want to move up to the ground floor, is there a lobby plan? Okay. Well, the lobby plan, we've programmed active space at the corner, and that's going to be actively managed with on-site personnel during business hours and on-call personnel 24/7, so we think that addresses the pedestrian safety issue on the site. Point 2, about the adverse impact on the adjoining properties. We will have an exterior roof deck. It will be facing south towards Washington Street, not directly exposed to any of the adjoining property owners. And additionally, we will be re-landscaping and redoing the Richland County Library, which is directly north of us, their southern entrance, and they have provided a letter of support for the project. So for those reasons, we don't think that it'll have adverse impact on the neighbors. Question number 3, aesthetic character of the area. So the current building is the same height and materiality as what was previously approved by DDRC in 2016. So for that reason, we don't think it'll have an adverse impact on the aesthetic character of the area. Adverse impact on public safety, create a nuisance detrimental to public interest. So I already addressed this. The recreational spaces will not be exposed to the neighbors, so we don't think it'll create a noise nuisance to the neighbors. Question number 5, concentration of similar uses. To the north is the library. To the west, we have cocktail bar. There are other student housing projects nearby, but there's a large variation in uses, so we do not believe that we're concentrating uses in an unhealthy way. As far as the special exception being consistent with the character and intent of the area, the underlying zoning is C4. The height is the height and general massing are the same as what was previously approved, so we do believe that it is consistent with the character of C4 zoning. And as far as the appropriateness for its location, we have confirmed, well, we're close to the University of South Carolina, the Vista, several demand drivers for student housing, so we think it's a very appropriate use for the location. And just generally, not adversely affecting public interest, we think that, since it is consistent with the intent of C4 zoning and has access to adequate infrastructure, and it won't create a public nuisance, we think that it will not adversely affect the public interest. Is there anything else?
Great. Is that it?
Yes, sir.
Is anybody in the room here to speak for or against this application? I don't see anyone. Any question from the board?
I have a few questions. Have you spoken to USC about this? I guess I'm getting at how do you measure demand for student housing, and do you think you can fill 679 beds?
We have not had any formal interaction with the University of South Carolina, but the way that we estimate demand is we look at occupancy and rents at other projects like this in the area. Other projects are operating at full occupancy. They're increasing rents on an annual basis. Both of those evidence to us that there is additional demand for new product. Second thing we look at is just the ratio of both on-campus and off-campus beds to both the current student population and what the student population is expected to be with the projected growth that the university publishes. Those ratios are in balance and support additional density. And then finally, we look at really where students are currently living and where they would like to live. There's still a good amount of students who commute into campus and are, it's evidenced by the parking lots that are there. It's evidenced by properties that are further away from campus. And we believe that, walkable, closer to campus student housing is really, best serves both the community and the students. And that's kind of the demand drivers that we're looking at and that support our interest in this project.
I can give you an idea, too, that the university is leasing the new student housing development at UG and Assembly Street to put freshmen in because they don't have anywhere to put it in. They had to lease 40 rooms from the Marriott to put freshmen in this semester because they didn't have anywhere to go. So they're in tight needs and will be for some time to come, apparently.
How many cars are parked in that parking lot now, and how many would be displaced, I guess is what I'm asking.
I do know that we're providing 405 on-site spaces.
Please come to the microphone.
Yeah.
I do know, though, just anecdotally, we've been visiting the site and spent a lot of time in Columbia over the last 4 years, and it's often very sparsely parked. So in terms of the demand, I think that it's there's really not a big draw for those spaces currently.
Well, there's a lot of on-the-street parking in this area as well.
also in our experience, previously we were looking at the capacities of the existing garages, just, in the 400 and 800-foot perimeter of the site. And we also know that there's adequate capacity there as well, if there were any displaced parkers on a regular basis.
Which neighborhoods did you send this information to, and what was included? Did you send exactly what I have here in my packet out?
I did send, there is one package of about 17 elevations and plans. I sent that to the Downtown Neighborhood Association, the Vista Guild, the Vista Neighborhood Association, and I believe that's it.
And it was just the drawings, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Did it have anything about the density or parking or traffic studies?
There was one study at the end that had what's called a stacking diagram that shows the number of units and the number of parking on each floor.
And I believe the applicant had discussions with the City Center Partnership as well. There's an email that was handed out to you all as well with that. So, and they were provided the full packet.
Do you mind re-elaborating? I was listening, but just explaining again because y'all are applying the special exception is on the density per acre, but can you fill me in again real quick on how it got to what was the parking? I guess because you got so many people and you got to have a parking requirement for all those units, but how did it go again from the first scenario where you applied with the DDRC a couple years ago to?
So initially we went to DDRC with a design that did not include 4 and 5 bedroom units, so it was classified as a market rate apartment project, even though it was always intended to be operated as a student-focused project.
Yep.
And in that scenario, we had gotten a parking variance to provide half the parking. But upon further consideration, we think that it's best for both for us and for the city in general to provide a higher amount of parking. And when we didn't want to make the project any taller, so we added 3 levels of parking, and we were able to basically reduce the rentable area by making some of the 3 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms, and 5 bedrooms. So we're just building less kitchens.
Okay. So the city discussions to increase the parking at this project. So some of the 2 and 3 bedroom units that maybe had more common areas, some of that got taken out in favor of more dense units. And because of the more dense units, you got to have more parking spaces, and more dense units, you got to have a density per acre requirement for the private dormitory.
That's correct. And now we have 11 stories of residential when we had 14 initially. So we actually lost 3 floors of residential, but we kept a similar density in terms of beds by doing larger units.
Okay.
And I believe this is correct. Maybe staff can clarify if I'm incorrect, but the exception that we're asking for is on density. We're taking advantage of the fact that there are a sufficient number of spaces within 400 and 800 feet of our project to reduce the parking requirement. So we're not asking for an exception to the parking requirement. We're taking advantage of a lower requirement that is afforded to us because of that proximity of other parking.
This site is within the City Center Design District, so with that, any public parking, metered garage within 400 feet can count for up to 50% of the off-street vehicular parking. Private dormitory also has bicycle parking, which is not reduced, so they have to meet those numbers. And compared to the previous project, the variance that allowed for half the parking there does not apply just because the use has changed from multifamily to private dormitory. The special exception for density is specific to the private dormitory use. You cannot get that for any other use. So that's where that comes in. And they actually, the C4 district actually has no density requirement. It's the private dormitory use itself that sets that density requirement.
Mm-hmm.
This density per acre, how does this compare with some of your other facilities across the country that you mentioned earlier, Miami, et cetera?
Yeah, it's comparable. The student housing market as a whole is favored towards more dense product. Predominantly, you rent these units by bed. You provide secure access, like other projects in Columbia, within the unit, right? So 4 roommates, right, they all have the same key to get in the front door, but then they have unique keys to their bedrooms. We have bedroom and bathroom parity for the most part, right? So people don't just get their own room, they get their own ensuite bathroom. It's very consistent with projects at both larger and smaller schools across the country.
Can I ask a little bit about the easement? It wasn't clear to me, the easement with the library. Does the property line, does the building up to the property line and you're getting an easement on what?
So, International Building Code requires 15 feet of space in front of a wall with operable windows. And there are details about, percentage of opening and all that. But we've determined that we need about 10 feet on the library's land to achieve this. They're willing to give us an easement over that 10 feet and promise never to build anything there. And in return, we're going to give them a 10-foot easement along the north side of our property, and we're going to refinish and resurface their southern entry and make it a plaza or a pocket park. That's what the letter of support is referencing as far as the easement swap.
Is that where it's kind of looks like a ramp on the north end?
There's currently a ramp there, but that'll be expanded and it'll be programmable space. There'll be something like an exterior auditorium, and the design will be worked out with the library, so they will have input during that process.
Okay.
So this project will have to go to site plan review, so the building official will review and sign off on that easement if it meets their code during that review process.
And I assume that's worth something, that easement?
Well, right now it's swapped, so we're giving them an easement, and then we're also paying for all the improvements to that area along the southern part of their property.
But then just also to clarify, the building is within our property boundaries. It's just more about, in essence, it's the air rights, just so that we can maximize the glazing and have the fenestration, and sort of contribute that to the street front and sort of the urban wall.
Any other questions?
How tall is this proposed structure? I see that it's dimensioned, but I can't make that out.
About 180 feet, is that correct?
180.17.
So I have something that, while everyone's still thinking, this is not within the purview of BOZO, this is just a personal interest of mine. Have y'all ever thought about putting in bird-friendly windows? Are you familiar? And bird-friendly windows? It's high rises, birds hit them, they die. It's a real problem. It's not something we can require. I'm just curious if it's anything that y'all have thought about in the design.
I'm familiar with your concern. That's something we can consider. We haven't sort of factored it into the project.
Just curious.
I understand. And we have been also, and I know it's not under the purview of sort of this variance request, but we have over the last 4 years been in contact with Lucinda and the DDRC, and so in terms of the design and what you see today, it's sort of an ongoing exercise where we're folding in her impact, and so they're very familiar. Actually, we're presenting in January to the DDRC, seeking their final design approval as well.
Right. I mean, I can say that I know Clayco and CRG from other experiences. They're top-notch builders and developers. I would think they would really do a super job here, and I think they would. This is a well thought out plan, and I think it's something that's already been approved once from that standpoint, and I think they've actually got a better design for the city and the neighborhood than they had before. My comments on that.
Yeah, Yeah, I agree, Chuck. It's a very well thought out plan and impressive presentation. I think you all did a very good job with that. It's a extremely dense development, but in an area like this, it's in my mind appropriate for this area. You know, we've got a downtown area where certainly we're trying to encourage dense development like this and go vertically rather than spread out with large footprints. So and I think it's appropriate. I think it's a good plan.
And it's next door to the library. What a coincidence.
Yeah.
Great, thank you, gentlemen. Any other board discussion? We have, but approach, and we'll be glad to take yours, Jim. Sir?
Have not been sworn.
Yes, sir, but you raise your right hand. Do you swear and attest that you will tell the truth, nothing but the truth?
I will.
Thank you.
Members of the board, I'm Jim Daniel. I'm a commercial real estate broker and follow pretty closely the new student housing that are being discussed and then built, as well as the other types of downtown housing. My only concern with this project is, since the last time y'all heard this, there's a new complex on UG Street that's been approved. It's under construction. There's a new project on Shop Road that's under construction, should be finished in the fall. PMC is here today to discuss one of their new projects, and they have 2 or 3 others down in the Olympia Mills. Again, the question is, gentlemen, this market appears to be oversaturated. We've got a couple of more years of the university still adding freshmen, and then it's supposed to cap out. These are 4 and 5 bedrooms. If the market eventually reaches the point that there are not enough students to fill this building, 4 and 5 bedrooms doesn't convert to a regular apartment complex. That would be my concern is, and there are other student housings out there still talking about things. I think the market, from my research, is right now overstaffed. They've run their study, they know, but the Edge will not convert to a regular apartment complex if and when the student housing market is maxed out. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Sure, come on back.
Just from a rebuttal standpoint, we appreciate exactly that concern. That's our business to be concerned about those factors and what future demand will be. I think I addressed that a little bit to your first question earlier, but we do have a third-party market study from the Gardner Group that supports the future demand for this project. You know, we've obviously done our own market research as well. To the convertibility standpoint, from a operating perspective, really what happens to fill units should market demand not be there is really an adjustment of rent and price, not of use. It's just far more efficient, right, to lower rent sufficiently to fill up a building as opposed to spend thousands of dollars attempting to refurbish a unit to make it into a different size. So, you know, it's just best practices within the industry, right, to design a building that you believe has the appropriate design for the market, and then you know, capitalize on that and adjust as you need in terms of occupancy and rent. So we're following industry practices there. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
So, and just to clarify, should these ever have to convert to multifamily, they would just be required to meet our occupancy requirements of no more than 3 unrelated per unit. The private dormitory use specifically allows more than that.
Just discussion. I mean, I think it's a positive that we have people from out of town wanting to, they do their market studies, they see the demand. I mean, are we going to say somebody wants to build an office building or a retail building, there's too much office buildings, we're not going to allow that. So I think it's a positive that there's the demand here. You know, professionals have done their homework. I don't think they would make the investment and the time if they didn't think the demand was there.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion that we approve this request based on the application and the written application and the testimony of the applicant, conditioned upon its substantial compliance with the presentation and presented here today, and subject to all comments from staff.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the next item is item number 12, case 2019-0081 for 1924 Blossom Street. This is a variance to the height requirement for a freestanding sign within the MX1 district. The applicant's present and can come forward.
Hi. Oh, you haven't been sworn in? Would you raise your right hand, please? Do you affirm or attest that you will tell the truth and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Do I just start? Okay, so my name is Kelly Hines Morris, and
We're going to need to get that
Okay.
mic down just a tad.
right. So I'm Kelly Hines Morris. I was born and raised right up the street from 5 Points, and about 5 blocks up, and that's really where my heart is. I'm concerned about 5 Points. I love the area. It's gotten a lot of bad rap lately, and our hope is to turn it around. I guess there's a problem with the sign that I have up because I purchased the building. I purchased it. I moved in there in 2006, and I bought it in 2007. I'm a board-certified ophthalmologist. I've been there for 12 years. I practiced ophthalmology in that small building, had a successful practice, and I moved around. It was about the end of July to early August of last year. I moved over to St. Julian Place. So it took me a little while to get moved out and to get the building leased. I did have it leased on January the 1st, so I was out of it from August until January 1st. The business that then moved in had the plans of replacing the sign that I had. They wanted to replace the face. However, the two business partners, it split up. So they were only there from January until May. So then I'm back with, a vacant building, and that was vacant from May until August when I leased it to Rain Living. So I know there's a problem with the time limit, that I'm over the 1 year mark as far as the time limit on having a sign that is not active or not representing the business that's there. I did, however, use the sign to direct patients to my new location. I did get a call that I had to take the sign down completely. I had no warning. There was no one who came and said, this sign has been here and it's not really providing any purpose. So when I got the phone call and they said, you need to have the sign taken down in 7 days, I was floored. I was like, well, this sign has been here for probably over 50 years. The business that was there years ago actually was an insurance company, and it was also the first drive-through bank and the first 24-hour depository in Columbia, and it has an old safe in there. It's got 2 safes that are functional, just to give a little history about the building. But back to the timeline that we're talking about, if you look at the time from when it was vacant until the time I had a new person that leased it, it pushed it just a little bit over the 1 year mark. Now, things don't happen overnight, so it took the guys that moved in some time to get their sign. So they were up putting their sign in, which they've already spent money on. They've already had it fabricated. They were putting the sign in, and I guess the city came around and said that we're not able to put the sign in because they didn't have their business license. Well, part of that is because it took the city a little time to approve the business license. So, let's see. So the the main reason, they want me to bring the sign down to within 4 feet. Well, if you look at where it's located, that's going to be a problem, because if you bring it down to 4 feet, you're then going to block traffic coming in and out of that corner. It decreases visibility. That's already a very dangerous corner. I've gone out, over my 12 years there, I've gone out and I've seen multiple car accidents, some of them with a car upside down with a college girl hanging from her seatbelt. I think that the elevation of the sign is appropriate because it keeps the safety of that corner. Cars go flying by there, as we all know. It's a very dangerous corner. The signage really helps. I don't think it interferes with the visibility of, I don't think it's an ugly sign. It does need work, of course. The guys that moved in had plans to refurbish it and clean the posts up and repaint it, put the new sign in, and make it very attractive. I recently also have been instrumental in cleaning up the corner it's been grown up like a jungle, and I was instrumental in helping repave the other side. So we're trying to make some improvements, but we all know it's hard to lease buildings in 5 Points. So when you look at the corner, it's a very small building. It gets overlooked, so I think that the signage is necessary. Also, if I have to remove the sign, I'm kind of breaking my contract with the person that I leased to, because they leased it with the idea that that's where they're going to put their sign. So now I'm kind of in a pickle. Let's see. So it won't harm the character of the district. Like I said, it's been there for probably 50 years. What else?
I think you've covered all of the criteria that I could tell. Is there anyone else here that wants to speak about this application? Kate, could you let us take some other testimony first? Then we can come back to you. Thanks, Kelly.
Again, I'm Jim Daniel. The representatives of Wales Garden, the president and Kit Smith, couldn't be here today because of conflict, so I'm sort of filling in for them. I'm president of the Wheeler Hill Neighborhood Association. The concerns they raised in a series of emails yesterday was the height of the sign. I realized that the board had approved a new higher sign for Home Team Barbecue, but that is not a predominant location going into the neighborhood, whereas in this case, this sign is at the entrance of the Wales Garden neighborhood. I think the suggestions they would propose is more of a monument sign at this location, high enough to be seen, but low enough not to impede being able to turn right onto Saluda Avenue. So I think what they have discussed with me is they think the sign is too tall. It needs to comply with the present sign guidelines, and a monument sign would be better at that location.
Jim, will you come back to the podium? So I think that the applicant makes a good point that, if you go with the lower sign, then you're going to be blocking visibility from traffic.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, depends on where you put it. Why don't they move it more closer to the building, for example, than on the corner? Or is there, but yeah, that is a tricky corner, but there again, you're turning right. So if you have it either further closer to the building or you have it such, example would be the NBSC sign at the corner of Sumter and Pendleton. That went from an elevated sign to some degree now to a monument sign. Again, that's a right turn corner. And y'all approved that a number of months ago.
Just a quick rebuttal or whatever. Cars that are parked there that are having to back out, the cars they come from different directions. So when you have cars that are going really fast on Blossom Street and then they stop and they're turning, when you're backing out of that, as you're backing out, you're really looking this way. You're not looking at cars coming around, and that would really block the visibility of the cars that are coming from this way turning in. I mean, if it's 4 feet tall, you're not going to be able to see. And like I said, cars they fly by there. And if you're coming down Divine Street, you really need that visibility. The other corners have the big banks, and so they're monsters. But when patients, when they're looking for that little corner in that little building, they're like, well, where is it? I don't see it. And it's like, well, look around, you'll see the big sign up there. So.
I can't tell from this. Can you turn from Blossom into the parking lot?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, you can't turn, you have to turn into Saluda.
You have to turn into, so there's no, okay.
Yeah.
No entry on Blossom.
Oh, yes. The other point was, if we put a 4-foot tall sign there, it's going to be vandalized within a week. I really feel like, the college students are all walking down to 5 Points and coming back at night, and it's going to be drawn on or messed with. And nobody's ever messed with that one because it's elevated and they don't really pay attention to it when they're walking by.
Don't issue a challenge.
Y'all probably remember the Cato zoning application that came to y'all a couple of years ago when an out-of-state developer wanted to put a restaurant at the Master Cleaners location. That owner owns he owns the Master Cleaners property in an L shape that leads back to Saluda Avenue. Her property is just at that corner and is basically surrounded by the property of the man who wanted to do the Mikado restaurant. So there is access off of Saluda, no access off of Blossom Street.
So just as a matter of clarification, a sign would not have to go exactly where the current sign is, and wall signs are also permitted in the district. So they're not bound to one type of sign.
Rachel, I'm not really sure if this is relevant or not, but I'm just curious. I've been thinking this for a few minutes here. In a MX1 zoning designated area, 4-foot sign seems kind of low to me for a cap. Is that consistent with other municipalities, or do you have any? It just seems kind of low.
In some of the urban districts, so this area, the 5 Points area, was rezoned. Don't quote me on it, but around 2009, 2010, and the 5 Points overlay district was created to be a pedestrian-friendly district, and that's where the lower signs come in. It's supposed to gear towards more of the urban village pedestrian visibility instead of the commercial drive-by kind of view. So that's where that overlay district and that design came from. So in the North Main corridor is also that MX1 with the same 4-foot requirement.
Was there one more person?
I'm Jim Morris. I'm actually Kelly's husband. And I'm just I kind of flummoxed at this thing, how I now understand. We've never talked with any of the community, this group. Nobody ever contacted us. And so this is sort of interesting, but at least now I understand why everything happened like that. Like the second she was there for a year, they're putting a sign up, somebody gave a call, zoning came down, told the guys they couldn't put the sign up. It's almost like it was orchestrated. To the point about the 4-foot, we love 5 Points. We understand when you're driving down most of the 5 Points area, you're going about 15 miles an hour. I mean, you're going to all the little stores on the left and the right. A low sign is one thing. You're going, 30,000 cars a day past that thing, and they go pretty fast. Rain right now has a sign on the side because they had to do something, so they did put it on the side of the building. It's not, it doesn't have the visibility. This thing was grandfathered in for a particular reason. They got pulled into the 5 Points district, but they're not exactly the same as all the rest of the 5 Points district. I mean, all the close-knit stores and everything else. She's one of the only 2 places on the other side of Blossom. So there's kind of a reason for why she wanted to keep that sign there, and the safety issue was part of it. But I'm really concerned why this whole thing got driven so fast. How did the zoning guy show up the day that they were putting the sign up? Exactly 1 year. It was kind of orchestrated. So I'm disappointed. As much as Kelly has put into this thing, I don't own the building, but she's my wife. Her heart's in this place, and for them to get all upset with this, it's just disturbing how it's all been orchestrated. But that sign keeps the safety, keeps the vandalism off. It is across the street, not in the walk-in area, and so we should consider what her comments were about all that. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
To address that, my inspector came across a sign company putting a sign up without a permit. So we did, at that point, realize that there had been a year lapse. So that is how it was discussed. Our duty is to enforce our ordinance, and that is what we do. Thank you.
No testimony from the floor, please. Thank you. Okay. Any discussion?
Well, the scale of the buildings on the adjacent properties here, I think that is one thing that does make it necessary to have a little taller sign than normal. You've got I guess it's the TD Bank across the street, this 2 or 3 stories, or appears to be a couple stories tall, and the other surrounding developments do sort of dwarf this smaller site, if you will. This is one of those things, I'm not sure I would be in favor of this if we were talking about a brand-new plan and constructing a new sign in this location, but the overriding factor here for me is the fact that this sign has been here for a long time in its current location, and it doesn't prohibit it doesn't cause any sort of site obstruction. It helps with that. So the fact that it's been here for so long, and I think it's a benefit to this smaller site, leads me to be in favor of granting the variance for the height requirement. Again, if this was a brand-new discussion and a brand-new plan, I might would feel differently. But in this particular instance, weighing all the different factors, I think I'm okay with it and would be in favor of this variance.
I agree with you. Exactly. My thoughts. Any other comments?
I don't necessarily agree with y'all on that, but I think this is an opportunity to. I'm struggling with the hardship. I mean, you mentioned the taller buildings, but a well-done monument sign. I think this is an opportunity to take an older-looking sign, something that was built decades ago, and enforce a code requirement. I think this is an opportunity to improve the aesthetics of that property and improve the property value in doing that. But so I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at with it.
I'd like to make a motion that we approve this request for a variance subject to the applicant receiving a proper permit from the CDA review in the City of Columbia to install the sign, and that should it become vacant for 12 consecutive months, special exception could be considered to be expired.
Second.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
No. Okay, I think that carries.
The next item on the agenda is item number 13, case 2019-0082 for 401 Hayward Street, North-South Hayward Street, 501 Hayward and North-South another Hayward Street. Variance to the buffer transition yard requirement. This corresponds with item number 14, but we will discuss the buffer first and then move on to the parking variance. The applicant can come forward.
Good morning. To give you a little bit of background on this block, it's a sort of a unique site positioned across from Olympia and Granby Mills. So to the south of the site, you have Olympia and Granby Mills. To the east, you have 612 Whaley Apartments, which is a 4-story building. And then to the west, you have a 2-story office building. All of these are historic structures, and then you have the mill houses to the north. The site is unique in that it's never been developed like the properties all around it, and so there's unique constraints for this site. In talking with the neighborhood associations and the city, the goal was to maintain sort of the more commercial, higher density core along Hayward Street, and so that drove the scale of this development and what you see in front of you today. We've had a couple of rounds of design based on the circulation around the site, working with the city, with traffic engineers, and the Scott Holder with landscaping with the city. The goal was to have a continuous one-way drive along the north side of the buildings to maintain access and to provide parking for each building. However, the site constraints were such that we could not fit a one-way drive with parking, and the city required landscape buffer along that north property line. And so this variance is to remove that buffer to allow us to provide that one-way access drive. We looked at alternates. If you'll notice, the parcel to the west has individual driveways, sort of like the residential units behind it might. And we thought that would work for all of these buildings. However, Hugie Street and Church Street are both DOT roads, and they do not allow backing out onto those roads from the parcels. So really the access drive is the only approach that will work and meet DOT requirements in this area. So the plan before you removes the landscape buffer. However, we still do maintain a 6-foot buffer wall between the two parcels to still provide that physical barrier from those properties to the north. So we are maintaining that.
Okay, so the plan here is to build a duplex dwelling on each of these parcels, is that correct?
That's correct. So in total, we have 4 parcels, and the parcel along Tryon and Hayward has 2 duplexes, as does the next parcel over. And then we have 1 parcel with a single duplex, and that was in part to maintain an existing tree that's on the corner of that parcel. And then that final parcel to the east has 2 duplexes as well. And so the variance would apply to those 3 easternmost parcels, but not the western parcel. We are maintaining the buffer in that case.
I mean, I think the hardship here is just sort of due to the size of the lots, and I think it's a good plan to transition from the mills into the neighborhood with these duplexes. I think they're keeping the spirit of the architecture. I mean, you look at the design; they got the large windows. So I think it's a good transition from the mills to the neighborhood, and similar to the previous case, but different in the fact that it's much larger. The one on Assembly Street, they're utilizing off-street parking to meet some of their parking demands. So I think this is, even though much smaller in scale, it's similar concept.
It's a very challenging site. I mean, that's evident from what you've got there. Okay, is there anybody else here to speak in favor or against this application?
Good morning. I'm Bob Gould with the Granby Neighborhood Association. I want to speak in favor of both variances for the buffer yard and the parking requirements. As the architect just mentioned, they've worked intensely with the Neighborhood Association, and we believe this is a project that we can all be proud of. It's extremely complementary with the industrial scale of the adjacent mill office building and the 612 Whaley Street infill building, and complements, of course, the adaptive reuse of historic Granby and Olympia mills across the street. I want to compliment the Garvin Design Group. This is a project, one of many that's made a real contribution to the neighborhood and to the community. I read that they just received an AIA State Firm Award, rarely given, but they deserve it. We think that with regard to the variance requirements for both the buffer yard and the off-street parking, or the parking requirement, I should say, that this is complementary and not detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood, and in fact makes a positive contribution to the welfare of the community. And by the way, I think I read the plans specifically provide for a brick masonry wall as the buffer yard, and that's certainly what we would expect and support. And we do know that having DOT own a bunch of our neighborhood streets makes development and parking requirements complex and challenging, and we think this is an appropriate solution. So all in all, we support the variances sought on both items regarding the Hayward Street development, and think it will be a positive contribution to our community. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jim Daniel, can you go back to the slide that shows the 4 lots, please? The vacant lots at the beginning. Yeah. My office for over almost 10 years was at the corner of Haywood and Tryon Street. My office actually looked over this parking lot. I don't think that picture is a true representation of the cars that were typically parked on that lot. Those lots were typically at least 2/3 of the time filled. So my inquiry to the applicant is, where are those cars moving? PMC is building a new project behind the existing mill. While that's going on, they've moved the parking to the grassy area in front of the mills. They're building a new complex to the right, backing up to the quarry with, I think, parking. But the real issue is, where are the cars going to park that used to be on this lot? Thank you.
Hey, Jim, is that your office at the corner of Tryon and Hayward, that 2-story office?
My window looked directly out on that parking lot. I was on the first floor.
How much parking do y'all have there?
26 spaces. That building was recently sold. The lawyers that owned it sold it to another law firm. The lawyers that owned it are now on the first floor. The new lawyers are on the second floor. I'll wait to see how that parking works. You got to remember that Tryon is a park only for residents, and the city enforces that pretty strongly. So any student parking on Tryon runs the risk of getting a parking ticket. And there's a lot of no parking on the south side of Haywood Street that runs in front of the mills. So basically you're limited to some parking on the north side of Haywood, the existing parking lot behind the newest mill building, and these 4 lots which used to handle a lot of cars. Thanks.
Great. Is there anybody else?
I did just want to clarify on the cars that are currently parked there. They're a little bit outside of this scope, but it's more of a property-wide plan that they'll have to implement. And during construction there's another construction project going on, which is called the Granby Cottages behind Granby Mill. And so during that construction, it's sort of pushed some cars that would be on that site to other places around the property. And so when that construction is complete, it'll help to alleviate. But this project would also obviously stagger from that construction project, so it wouldn't be compounded with that.
These cars that are parking there, are they legally parking there or just parking?
They
there
are.
for the fake?
These properties and the mills are all owned by the same developer, and so they're able to
It's
use all of
allowed.
these. That's right.
So those are students parking there from across? the
Predominantly,
street?
yes, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
Parking lot closest to the newest mill, that's roughly 20 cars parking on that one, and each of those lots is the same. You could conceivably have had 80 parking places, or 80 cars parked on those 4 lots. Where are they going to go?
Were they a requirement from the last development? Were these, I mean,
I don't remember the,
just because somebody's parking on them doesn't mean that, you know, they have to keep parking on them. I mean, you can't.
but Chuck, the big issue is, it's a great development. It's very, very, very popular. You got all these cars, trust me, is at least, it's not to code if you look at how many, I mean, everybody's got a car for pretty much all intents.
Well, they meet the parking requirements of
That's
the
true.
development. They're just talking about a transition buffer.
Well, yeah, but the problem is you got 80 cars that have been parking here. The other lots are full. Where are they going to go? I mean, that's the neighbor. You can't park on Tryon Street. Bluff Road or Olympia Avenue has no parking.
You know what? They're going to have to find a place to go. They're going to have to rent a parking place or go in the garage or do something different. That's what they're going to have to do. Because it's not their property to park on. They don't own it. They're parking on it because it's convenient.
Those 4 lots there are owned by the same developer that owns the mills.
Right?
So he could conceivably have 60 cars parking there that don't fit into existing facilities. Granted, he's got to come up with a plan, but by approving this today, you are eliminating the potential parking of 50 to 60 cars, plus the 2 per thing with...
I believe, though, that I've already established that these lots were not part of the parking requirement for this development. Rachel, is that right?
They are not. So, and staff is addressing parking concerns with the developer.
Thank you.
So to clarify, these were not required for the across the
They're
street?
spillover.
Yeah.
They're extra. They were not required when they got their...
Correct. So the parking in the rear was for the mills. So there are various parking lots over there owned by the same developer that there's been some spillover that has parked there. So, and they will have to find legal off-street parking spaces to accommodate for those cars being.
They just have to walk further to get back to their units.
I think y'all have done a better job of digging into a question that I was sort of wondering. Chuck asked it much better than I did, but I guess now we need to remember that although this is important to our discussion, it's not really what we're asked to do. I think we've established that that we're not going to be violating any sort of a code regarding any parking on an adjacent structure by either approving or denying this variance request. So I think it's important for the board to remember that.
Agreed. Any other discussion?
The wall serves as a good, good alternative to the buffer. 20-foot buffer would be better, but it is a challenging site. I think John Gregory said it really well when he said that this really helps with a nice transition in the scale from the very large structure across the street to your smaller homes. And I hadn't really thought of about that, but thinking about that, it really does. I think that's a very good point. I think you've done a good job with their plan here. Really good job.
I'd like to make a motion to approve it, subject to further staff comments and, yeah.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Carries.
All right, the next item on the agenda is for just the 501 Hayward Street, an adjacent parcel for, it's 2019-0083. This is a variance to the off-street parking requirement for residential use. I want to clarify that this is not to reduce the number for the duplexes. On this side of Hayward, or in this zoning district, they cannot have what is called a group development, which is 5 dwelling units or more. So they are having to draw a new property line, and that's one of the reasons why there's a single duplex and then 2 duplexes. There will be some shared parking aspects. Some of the parking for the 2 duplexes will be on the parcel with the single duplex. With residential uses, you cannot use the remote parking relief that is available for the commercial uses. So that is why they're before you with a variance. But it is not to reduce the overall number required on the site. It's just there's going to be some on an adjacent parcel to meet the needs of the 2 duplexes. The applicant's welcome to come back to the mic to address.
Yeah, so I think Rachel stated it perfectly. We're basically looking at the buildings between Hugie Street and Church Street. Right now, there is a property line that runs between the first building and second building. And so, essentially, to serve the 2 buildings to the east, we'll have to park 2 cars on the parcel to the west. And so, if you take the 2 duplex site on its own, it won't meet that parking requirement. But if you look at the site as a whole, it will meet it. So we're not really asking for a reduction as much as just a relocation of those spaces to the adjacent site.
I guess I really addressed the wrong one. Just the comments I already made should be addressed to this. Again, the issue is where they're going to park. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, again, Bob Guy with the Neighborhood Association in Granby. We support the variance for parking as well. Parking is a challenge, but they meet the minimum requirement when taken together. Because parking is a challenge, the city as a whole may want to address minimum parking requirements in the ordinance in the future. We've resorted to getting a neighborhood permitting system that is pretty strictly enforced. I can tell you, I miss putting up my little parking pass and I get a ticket. So that's been the remedy we've had to resort to. I just think kids probably have a lot more cars than I did when I was in school and a lot more friends with cars, but they need to find parking places. This variance is a prerequisite, as we understand it, to developing these sites, and we support it for that reason.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the variance, subject to this stipulation that the total site is not losing any parking as the applicant stated.
Second.
And subject to staff comments.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, the final item on your agenda today is just the approval of the 2020 meeting calendar. So as a reminder, meeting days and times are changing starting in March of 2020. So we just need a motion and approval of the calendar, and we can get it posted for the public. And if you all have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
All spelled out in front of us. Pretty easy to understand.
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve. I second. All in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Carries.
No other business.
Move to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Motion carries.
Okay.
busy.
That was a busy one today. We got through it. That's all.
Yeah, I'll be in touch for sure.
Made it by 12.
I brought my computer today because I couldn't find my iPad. Yeah, next time, I plan on bringing my iPad. But they printed everything out.